Today we have our another new episode, and we will discuss on a specific question. AI experiments are drifting into dangerous water. Is Skynet the likely outcome? Professor Rob, what you want to discuss on these questions? What does
Sure.
it mean?
So we've had, like with any technology, and whenever you're dealing with engineers, whether they be software engineers, hardware engineers, there are a group of engineers that kind of want to see what if. What if we do this? What if we do that? And there have been a number of, let's call them questionable experiments so far. So one group created a rogue AI, created a hostile AI. This was an AI that pretty much wanted to kill everybody. And then they attempted to deprogram it, and it would continually revert. So in other words, they created a hostile AI. They tried to turn it into a friendly AI, and it consistently decided that the hostile path was the better path to be on, which is kind of problematic. We've had several problems now with rogue AIs where they create an AI to do one thing and it decided to do something completely different. And of course, in the AI space, we've had a number of issues with what we call AI hallucinations, where the AIs just make stuff up. The most damaging was in a legal sense, where the AIs just created citations that didn't exist, completely fabricated. And I believe the attorneys that use the AI are looking at being disbarred right now, certainly penalized. So this idea of creating AIs that can do harm or damage apparently has become a thing. And at the same time, of course, we're creating weapon systems that are artificially intelligent. We've got, I believe, the Secretary of Defense going up in an AI-flown fighter jet here in the next couple of weeks. We've had the Wingman program, which is a fully automated fighter jet that's under test by, I believe, Lockheed at the moment. And if you want, we've had robotic animals out there. You can actually order now a robotic dog with an attached flamethrower. Whether or not it can get shipped to you is going to be something else again. But this focus on AIs that can do harm long before we've created a defense if one gets out. In fact, just today I was reading an article that they've created an AI that will self-replicate, that will immediately clone and evolve itself over time, which sounds really brilliant, except if it goes down that hostile AI path or that rogue AI path, the question is how much damage it's going to do. And one of our big concerns, of course, right now is the amount of malware that appears to be being created that is AI based. So malware that is specifically designed to think through defenses and find ways around it. And this malware isn't just targeted at systems. We're using AIs for robocalls. The concern about AIs being used to change the outcome of elections, which you've seen both with regard to visual elements, as well as robocalls where the call comes in, it sounds like it's a particular politician. It's not. And then, of course, deepfakes, AI-driven deepfakes, which create impressions that people have done things that they haven't done or said things that they haven't said. So the proliferation of AIs that I would term hostile seems to be off the chart at the moment, yet the proliferation of defenses against these AIs is almost non-existent. And this takes us back to that Terminator concept, the idea that an AI that controls defensive systems could go rogue. And in fact, we've had several movies on this, not just Terminator. Colossus, a Forbin project, was a much earlier movie where the plot line was the U.S. and Russia created AIs, put them in control of the weapon systems, and then the AIs talked to each other and decided that they were going to take over the world. Relatively, at least protective of the human race, since they were saying, "Hey, you do what we want, or we'll kill everybody." But what they wanted people to do was destroy their weapons and live peacefully, which didn't sound like it was a bad thing, but clearly governments aren't really fond of that kind of control by a machine. It could be problematic. But what if the AI said, "Yeah, they're not going to listen. Let's just destroy them anyway." That's always the risk of any kind of a system that is unbounded, is that the system will go around those bounds and do something either accidentally or on purpose. That is incredibly damaging. So the premise here, at least that I entered, I didn't realize I was going to be alone here, today. But the premise that I'm putting forth is perhaps as we experiment with these AIs and look at creating hostile AIs, a much greater effort needs to be on how do we contain, mitigate, and recover from a rogue AI that a rogue or hostile AI that did a significant amount of damage.
Mhm. Thank you. My next question: what type of AI experiments are currently being conducted?
Sorry, ask the question again.
What are the AI experiments currently being conducted?
Sure. So we've got experiments going across the board. We've certainly in the war in Ukraine, we've seen AI play a significant role in terms of drones that can both stand by, can circle looking for targets, can self-select targets, and then move in and kill the targets they've selected. These tend to be relatively surgical, but we're now talking about creating a much larger drone swarm that can overcome most any defense and get through that defense to attack the target that they want. So the military focus on artificial intelligence is through the roof at the moment. I mentioned that the work to create automated fighter planes, wingman type units that can go up in formation with a human pilot, or fly alone. We've had drones, of course, for a long time, and weaponized drones for a long time, mostly with air-to-ground weapons. But nothing prevents them, particularly given the fact that the Russians have been effectively downing a lot of the U.S. drones. It's only a matter of time before we have air-to-air weapons on these drones, and the hard points on the drones probably would take air-to-air weapons now if we carried them forward. And so a lot of work is going into allowing or helping the drones defend themselves. A lot of work's going into ground-based robotics. The mules, the robotic mules to help carry material. But we also have robotic weapon systems that are being spun up. Most of the videos I've seen on robotic weapon systems that are concerning are some of the ones out of Russia, where they actually look like Terminators with multiple weapon hardpoints and the ability to target very accurately. Over time, they do tend to be tethered, but do fortunately appear to be tethered at the moment, because a walking Terminator would, I think, give us a lot more concern than I currently have. Then I mentioned that in terms of lab work, this idea of what would happen if you created a hostile drone, that's ongoing, and we've had, as I mentioned, that one big experiment where they created a hostile AI, so hostile drone, hostile AI, and they weren't able, and every time they tried to turn it into a benign AI, it reverted, which means that the programming the AI's ability to maintain its original programming is far more significant than I think anybody thought it was going to be. The research group did think they could reprogram a hostile AI to be benign, and that experiment failed. So that's really concerning, that you could create something as an experiment that was hostile. That experiment might escape and create severe problems. In fact, that's the theme of the book that was supposed to be a movie, a Robopocalypse. And then, of course, we've got experiments with regard to self-replicating AIs. As I mentioned, that was news that released today, that they've created a self-replicating AI that could clone itself in high volume and evolve through cloning. Certainly there'd be beneficial aspects to that, but there could also be incredibly devastating aspects to that. Just at the level of clones, that depending if they're taking up computing resources, they could bring a data center to its knees, much like a piece of malware would. And of course, we go to malware. There's a significant amount of R&D going into AI-driven malware for both military purposes and and for economic attack purposes. And we've certainly seen in the past where malware that's created by the military escapes containment and does broad damage. I remember a few years back, I believe it was Israel that created some malware that was supposed to damage Iran's nuclear research facility. That malware escaped and did a substantial amount of damage all over the world. I don't believe Israel was held accountable for that. But there is a real risk that some of this malware that is purposely created to do harm may not be containable. It's the same kind of risk we've often had with biological weapons, the fear that if you create a biological weapon that's incredibly effective, that biological weapon could escape the country it's targeted at and wipe out much of the planet, including your own population, which I think is one of the impediments one of the good impediments to the use of biological weapons. But that same risk exists for AI, where that AI malware could escape containment, could escape the targeted country or business that it was focused on, and do broad damage across a country, if not across the world.
Thank you, Prof. My next question: what safety measures and ethical guidelines are in place for AI research?
Well, so the issue here is that ethical guidelines and defenses are really rudimentary at the moment. You've got companies like IBM that profess an ethical approach to development of AI and do follow their own guidance and policies, but they're more the exception than the rule. With any race, and this is a race right now with AI, speed often takes precedence over safety. In fact, you could look at the problems that Boeing is having right now and argue that their problems with regard to quality and planes falling apart in the air and doors blowing off and the rest of it are because they overly focused on profits and speed. And as that focus shifted, they defocused safety, reliability, and to a certain extent maintainability in the aircraft, which is why they're underneath a cloud at the moment. And when you get into defense spending, particularly in a war setting, which we kind of are in at the moment, whether we're talking about Israel or Ukraine, the significant portion of the world is now on a war footing, and again, that means that the focus is on creating the weapon systems, not so much on protecting against them. So at least at the moment, government regulation is significantly lagging the opportunity to do harm. And worldwide regulation, for the most part, doesn't really exist. You've got advisories, you have guidance, but in terms of enforcement, there really isn't United Nations level effort of sufficient size and capacity to deal with a global AI threat should it emerge. So right now, the protective measures, and you could argue the same thing happened with nuclear power. The U.S. dropped nuclear weapons on Japan. The protections and various treaties to protect against nuclear weapons didn't come for years later. And right now, at least one of the proponents of the nuclear weapons, Russia, has backed away from the treaties, and so even that much older dangerous technology has appeared to have come off the rails. It's not even in place yet with AI, and may not be in place for another decade or so, which is problematic because AI is advancing on a monthly basis. What I would say is similar to what nuclear energy advanced on a yearly or decade basis, and so the speed in which this technology is advancing is unprecedented. Yet the defenses against it are not being invested in to the same level or anywhere near adequate at the moment.
Mm-hmm. My next questions to you: what mechanisms are in place to control and monitor AI behavior?
Most of the mechanisms in place appear to be company internal. There are two AI shield efforts, one from the Lifeboat Foundation and one inside Google, but they're not very powerful, and they're not government backed. So as of right now, governments are kind of struggling with the regulations that they would put in front of AI. There is no real auditing method, oversight method. Companies, individuals, and entities are kind of self-regulating, and that's always been a problem when you're on a war footage. Is self-regulation when folks are really concerned about weapon systems that they may fall behind. Probably isn't going to work. And recognize that external regulation may not work either. If you're facing a threat of an AI attack and you're trying to develop that particular threat, that is going to take precedence even over an external auditing function. What really needs to be in place is a global function with teeth that can hold countries accountable and can, when needed, invasively go in and investigate and discontinue efforts that could risk the planet. Those don't exist. It's very likely that we're going to have a major AI event that does a significant amount of damage before countries and eventually the world comes around to the idea that we need stronger defenses.
Excellent. What is the role of government regulations and oversight in AI research?
Well, it should be directly engaged. This should be a significant DARPA level effort, at least in the U.S., as well as in other countries, to make sure the government is deeply engaged, at least from an oversight standpoint, in any effort that could result in a national or international disaster. Just to make sure that folks are taking proper protective measures. We go back to the COVID pandemic. It does, at least to my eye, look like because remember when COVID broke out, prior to that, the Wuhan lab had failed a number of safety audits, and they were doing research on COVID type viruses, and so it seems at least likely that was the source of the contamination of a massive safety failure at the lab, because that was reported prior to the breakout. The same thing could happen here, but we don't really have the kind of testing, the kind of oversight that the labs typically have. And remember, if I'm correct, that testing failed at that COVID lab. They identified the problems, but the problems weren't corrected, and that what they were trying to prevent actually occurred. Well, we don't have that in place with AI research labs, particularly not AI defense labs. There's none of that oversight. There's none of that testing, and that testing exists relatively rigorously across biological research for the same reasons that I'm suggesting it should exist in terms of AI research, but it doesn't. And so government's role right now would be to use COVID as an example, whether it was sourced or not from the lab. That lab's failure in terms of safety measures should not only improve or advise modifications to the safety program so that labs are more rapidly held to account and that safety problems are more aggressively corrected before there's a problem. Those same kinds of methodologies should be applied to AI research to make sure that the research systems are air gapped, so that so anything created doesn't get out into the wild. And particularly with regard to any AI research into hostile AIs, self-replicating AIs, or AIs specifically designed to do harm, those are done in a very safe, done with expressly safe and secure methodologies, probably not done in anything but the most secure research labs and colleges and universities, because we know they've been compromised in the past. And so the technology is contained so that the ethical guidelines are solid and enforced, and so that we don't create the very thing that we're trying to protect ourselves against, a hostile, some type of hostile force that can do the world unrecoverable harm.
How we can develop some good startup in emerging economy?
How can we develop?
For solving any complex problem, let's say climate change related problems, solutions, or.
Well, yeah, AI has been focused on climate change thanks to NVIDIA to a large extent. Much of their Earth-2 effort is AI based. And we're finding that artificial intelligence can be used to do things that we thought only quantum technology could do, in terms of creating accurate large-scale models for weather predictions and to better showcase outcomes. But AI can do AI because if it's properly trained, can make better, faster decisions in terms of being able to mitigate or at least identify problems. First, of course, provide better alerting, so that if there is a major weather event coming through, people can either be evacuated or better sheltered against the event. You can also use it in simulation to create structures that can better resist events, be they earth-based like earthquake, or weather-based like hurricanes, tornadoes, and cyclones. And you can use it pretty aggressively to do that. You can also use AI as an auditing methodology. It's harder to corrupt an AI. So the system goes in and assesses a building, assesses an aircraft, assesses an automobile, and then provides an assessment or a repair list showcasing the things that need to be corrected to bring that particular construct back into compliance with whatever safety technologies are supposed to be in place, or build technologies that are supposed to mitigate the problems that the construct has are in place. And so you don't get things like, doors flying off airplanes, or the latest problem is, 787s coming apart in flight. So their AI can play a pretty significant role in terms of assuring quality and assuring rules that have been set are being followed and met as a learning function. Now, granted, you have issues with regard to people attempting to corrupt the AI or obfuscate the AI's reporting, but those can be mitigated as well. But they do need to be considered because, as we've seen in the past, anything that causes a slowdown in production, increases cost, or has any other type of adverse impact on competitiveness tends to take a second tier position against those things that are designed to advance profit, and clearly we saw that at Boeing, so making sure that, unlike internal audit, which was a similar protective function in corporations, which was nerfed over the years, we also have to assure that if we create these tools aren't corrupted, they aren't nerfed, they aren't prevented from doing their job.
Mhm. How the emerging economies policymaker, they can train themselves for AI, for AGI, for generative AI? How does it work?
Well, so they don't have to. The good news with regard to AI is, even to work with AI, you don't have to become an expert in the underlying technology. And the threats that I'm talking about are pretty obvious. It's, you're creating your experiment is to create a hostile AI that wants to hurt or kill or damage. That's certainly going to be a pretty obvious red flag. So the issue with regard to regulators is they've got to become familiar with where the technology is, what the technology can do, what it can't do, and what the timeline looks like, which right now is very fragmented. Timeline looks like in terms of advancement when these threats are likely to emerge. Now, some of the threats are emerging right now, but that then gives the regulator an idea where their focus must be over a given time, and certainly put in place a reporting structure where the companies doing AI research are required to report whether that research, with penalties, whether that research is likely to result in any kind of a problem, and then without necessarily disclosing the details of the research because it's going to be a competitive secret, do talk a bit about the methodologies they're using to protect the nation from the research. In other words, much like that Wuhan lab, here are the standards they have to implement to make sure that what they're creating doesn't become a problem, and ensuring that those standards are in place. So an audit, some type of an audit and enforcement path, where somebody goes in that is themselves AI competent, and looks at and then blesses or reports on any problems that they've discovered in the research facility, so those problems can be corrected before they before they escape containment and become a problem for the government or a problem for the citizens.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Like how we can solve any kind of emerging economic problem like housing, healthcare, air purification, education through AI?
Well, AI can help you prioritize. Often the problem is with government is they take a shotgun approach to all the problems. And I mean, to give you an example, when we had President Obama here, he wanted to help correct infrastructure. And so he took this massive amount of money, billions of dollars, but he wanted to be fair. And so he divided it up equally amongst the cities, towns, and entities across the United States. And that so diluted the amount of money that even that massive amount of money had very little impact on what it was they wanted to do. So AI can help prioritize, can help focus. Because often, as I say, what government does is they spend on everything, and so there's never enough money for anything. And so AI can help lay out a plan that can provide the highest benefit for the least amount of money, and can really help government be much more effective, because it can allow the government to push back on every politician wanting a little bit of money for their own constituents, which is really what causes this dilution. Is the idea that I want some money for my people, and everybody says I want some money for my people, and there isn't an unlimited amount of money. There's a fixed sum that can be used to do some things, and so you can actually use it to fix a few things, or you can dilute it across a lot of things and not fix anything. And right now, government more often takes the latter path. AI can help focus the effort, can help design the effort to in a way that the benefit from that effort is shared with the folks that otherwise would want some of that money but wouldn't get enough to do anything with it, and can help provide a certain amount of logic and rigor behind the budgeting and expenditure process, so that whatever money you have can have the greatest impact and the greatest benefit for the country. So AI can be a tremendous tool in terms of taking bias out of the system and getting around some of the common problems that decision makers make, either inside companies or as regulators in countries, to make the best use of the resources that they have.
Mhm. What will be the next few years AI impact in economy and in society and in cultures? What do you think?
Well, so it's going to have a significant impact. I mean, particularly as we spin up chatbots, and we already have AIs, and people are dating AIs now. They've got AI girlfriends, more AI girlfriends than I think boyfriends. But it's already having a societal impact, and right now it appears to be isolating. In other words, with an AI, you basically only hear and increasingly only see stuff that you already agree with. So it tends to be very polarizing. There's a high chance it's going to start causing civil wars, as the reality that people that are interfacing with AI news services diverge from other people that are doing the same thing, and each group believes they're absolutely right. The typical problem we've had with religions in the past and between parties are going to be exacerbated by AI, and at least right now, increase those divisions and problems between groups going forward. And a lot of people, an increasing number of people, are going to self-isolate, likely only interfacing with AIs and increasingly not interface with other people, because it's just easier to interface with an AI. Not good for the culture or the race, but these are underlying issues that we're not really addressing, and you can get the same kind of addiction to AIs that you get from gaming, from pornography, from certain types of religions, where the people really do kind of self-isolate and become so tied to their information source that they're unable to cooperate or collaborate with their neighbors or with their country, and that can be problematic. So as I expect over the next 5 years, we're going to have serious problems with regard to AI in an uncontrolled manner, changing how cultures function and how people interrelate, unless we put in place protections that prevent that. But if you think some of the addiction problems we've had in the past are bad, it'll be nothing like what we're going to have with AI as this advances.
Thank you. What's your closing remarks?
So AI provides a significant amount of potential benefits. It's a huge automation platform. It can make it so there are a lot of things that we currently have to do and don't like doing, we don't have to do anymore. It can make jobs more enjoyable. It can make driving and traveling far safer, but it can also do a lot of harm. And the underlying problem right now is the development efforts cannot easily differentiate between the things that they're doing that are good and the things that are doing that are harmful, largely to the fact that most of these efforts are targeted at revenue generation and profit, and not really targeted at making the world a better place or making us better people. I mean, if you look at the initial focus for business AI, it's much more on the sales and customer interface side than it is on the employee development side at the moment, and there really isn't a whole lot of effort driving AI into education to make better students. That really should be a much bigger priority than it is. So I think right now we really need to step back and take a look at our priorities. And at the very least, if we're going to work on AI and really experiment with it being hostile and increasingly use it to create malware and advanced weapon systems, that there should be an equal effort that creates defenses for these things so that the citizens that the government is supposed to protect are kept safe throughout this advancement. It does, and the reason I came up with the topic, bother me that we appear to be looking at that Terminator movie, the concept of Skynet, and instead of taking this as a cautionary tale, looking at like it's some kind of to-do list. I was looking at the scene that was cut from the movie Terminator, where they basically promote each of the weapon systems that were created. And I could go to an actual weapon system that matched up with each of the things that are under development, that matched up with everything that was in that Skynet clip. And I think that's problematic because whether or not that identical outcome will emerge isn't as important as the fact that some related outcome could very well emerge, because that's the weapon we're playing with. And often when you play with the weapon, something really bad happens. And we need to get to the point very rapidly where there's much more rigor here and much more oversight to ensure that the AI we create isn't the last thing we create before ending our race.
Thank you, Professor Rao, for your excellent contribution for today's sessions. I request all of our audience, please share our content as much as possible. Thank you, Mr. Rao. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.
Bye-bye.